Let us worship.
Thank you so much. You transported me to the sanctuary and to your music. Thank you. We would like to extend an especially warm welcome to those who are here for the first time. So glad you're here. Our greeter is dropping our connection card into the chat box if you'd like to complete that as a way to connect to our community. It's a caring and supportive community, and we have a pastoral care committee who works closely with our minister, Reverend Laura, to provide support, care, and a listening ear. So please fill out that pastoral care card also being dropped into the chat box if you would like the care team or Reverend Laura to reach out to you. There's also a link on our website for that. And our online services are intergenerational. We have a religious exploration program as well, whose director, Rebecca Britt, is always happy to hear from you, and her email is being dropped in the chat box now. There's a lot happening at South Valley, and the Happenings Weekly newsletter is a great way, concise way, up to date to stay connected. And so Lori Quigley is email for getting that newsletter if you don't already get that. We're also active on Facebook, and there's an event calendar on our website. And a couple of announcements today. Today's the last Sunday of the pledge drive. Your support of South Valley is what keeps our mission going, and which we hold a pledge drive once a year. And members, friends, and supporters pledge your time, your talent, and your treasure. Please make your commitment now. If you haven't already done it, there's a link in the chat box. We are at 81%, which is great, of our goal, but it also means that those who haven't pledged yet are still needed. Please see the link that Scott Renshaw, our volunteer head of the pledge drive, has put in the chat. And thank you all for giving of your time, talent, and treasures to South Valley. I know Maureen and I always look at that and do as much as we can to make sure this community thrives and continues forward. Be sure to read that Happenings newsletter. For instance, there's some really cool things going on. Today, if you want your Stuffy to go to Stuffy Sleepaway Camp, you can drop them off for camp between 3 and 5 today at South Valley. And they will have a lovely week-long camp where you'll get updates from Rebecca Britt of what they're doing. And then you can pick them up next Sunday at the Hunt for Justice. And the Hunt for Justice is open to everyone who wants to come. A twist on the Easter egg hunt idea. And that is 3 to 5 next Sunday on Easter. So please feel free, people of all ages, to come to that Hunt for Justice next Sunday. We're now going to take a moment to share the warmth of community. So we'll say hello to one another. We'll light our chalices together. So if you do want to unmute yourselves for this part, please feel free. Maybe you want to put people on gallery view so you can see each other, and please do say hello.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Everybody.
Hi, Becky, Betsy, Sloan.
Nice to see everybody.
Susan and Mark.
Hi, Ellen.
What a gorgeous day, huh?
Yes. Definitely.
This is from Good morning from Sandy. I don't know where all. I'm going to flip through and see who else is here.
Good morning, everyone. So glad you're here. Let's light our chalices together.
Hi, Caden. Oh.
And the words to, it's great to hear each other saying hello. The words to the chalice lighting are in the chat. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action.
Hello, my name is Sarah Featherstone, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. My pronouns are she and her. Come, come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes. You are welcome here. No matter what you've experienced in the past, no matter what awaits you in the future, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, or some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. You are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society.
I am the Reverend Laura Young, and my pronouns are she and her. It is so good to be together as the spring begins to come upon the Valley of Salt Lake, and we can begin to see those little tiny buds on the trees beginning to show, and those daffodils I learned this morning are bursting up in front of the church. So we will all be able to see them either this afternoon when you drop off your beloved stuffed animal, or next Sunday for the Hunt for Justice. It has been a long COVID winter, and we are beginning to emerge from that. And I hope just to name that again this morning as we settle in and as we wait for the vaccines to continue to roll out. I just implore you as one human being to the other to just stay the course. We are almost there, we hope. We are almost there. Let us keep our masks on and keep vigilant so that this hope that we are all so desperately in need of can actually become our reality. We are almost there. We are looking forward to being able to gather as a congregation once again in the next couple of months, and our behavior now matters. What we do now matters. So get your vaccination signed up. We're all eligible now at this point if we're over the age of 16. So I hope everyone is getting that settled, and I'll be getting mine soon, and I'll be sure to post that on Facebook for you to celebrate that arrival. I would be remiss in the call to worship if I did not yet name again the tragedy of mass shootings that is such a terrible reality in this country, and one that it seems so easy to have despair around, not just for the loss of life and the suffering for the families left in the wake of those shootings, but for the seemingly intractable politics that make it so that we cannot even hear one another in the midst of this and come to a place of shared and common ground for the sacredness of life, while still respecting the right of people to live responsible lives as they wish. I know this is a complicated topic, but I do call us to yet again be in community with one another. And so you sit with the reality of the shooting in Boulder last week, coming on the heels of the shooting in Florida the week before. These are unacceptable realities, unacceptable losses of life, and are unnecessary. And we send our heart to those who are recovering in the midst of that. And we know that prayer is not enough, but that good dialogue is what is needed to be able to find our way through. And it seems that in this place, a blessing for that heart that wants to unfurl and to stand solid for justice and love and compassion in our world, would need a blessing in this space. So the blessing this morning is called The Blessing, the House of the Heart, and is written by Jan Richardson. And she writes, blessing the house of the heart. If you could see how this blessing shimmers inside you, you would never wonder whether there will be light enough, time enough, room enough for you. If you could see the way this blessing has inscribed itself on every wall of your heart, writing its shining light across every doorway, tracing the edge of every window and table and hall. If you could see this, you would never question where home is or whether it has a welcome for you. This blessing wishes to give you a glimpse. It will not tell you it has been waiting. It will not tell you it has been keeping watch. It would not want you to know just how long it has been holding this quiet vigil for you. It simply wants you to see what it sees, wants you to know what it knows, how this blessing already blazes within you, illuminating every corner of your broken and beautiful heart. Let us be together in this place, knowing that wherever we are, this is holy ground. Let's sing together now. Rick is in our sanctuary at South Valley. He'll be playing our hymn live for us. It's number 368. Let us sing. The chat box is full of the lyrics, and if you know the parts, feel free just to sing it out loud, but you'll be on mute because Zoom doesn't let us sing together in a cohesive way. Okay, come one and come all for a story for all ages. This story is written by Sarah Conover, and it's an adaptation of the story of the birth of the goddess Durga. That's 1 second. I can't see my notes here. Here we go. One evening. Oh, and by the way, children and young people in the audience, this story is a little bit scary. So if you're sitting next to your parent, you might want to hold their hand so that they do not feel afraid as we tell the story together. So one evening, as grandmother Lakshmi was enjoying her chai, a girl approached her and said, "Grandmother, we have an issue that needs to be resolved between the boys and the girls. The boys do not believe that a goddess once proved herself better able than any male god to defeat evil in the universe. They say that the male gods are always more powerful." Now, grandmother Lakshmi heard this and said, "I believe it is possible that both of you are correct. To know the truth, let me tell you the story of the goddess Durga. However, it's a very, very long story. So let me just tell you the highlights." This story begins with a demon named Mahisha. He was half buffalo and half man and a terrible bully. Like all his demon brothers, he cared only about himself, and he never remembered that his selfishness always sowed the seeds of his own destruction. Unlike humans, asuras, or demons, do not learn from their mistakes. Mahisha wanted what all the other asuras want, to be the most powerful being in all of the universe. And this meant becoming immortal. After 10,000 years of deep meditation, Mahisha's efforts were noticed by the Lord Brahma, who came to Mahisha and said, "I am pleased with your devotion, my son. What boon, what reward do you seek?" Mahisha replied, "I wish to be immortal." And Brahma replied, "Oh, Mahisha, all who are born must die. This is the eternal law of nature. I cannot grant your request. Ask for something else." So Mahisha thought for a while and said, "Oh, grand sir, grant me then that no male god, human or asura, may cause my death. If I must die someday, my lord, let it be at the hands of a woman." Since Mahisha believed it was impossible for a woman to attack and conquer him, he thought this was how he could trick Brahma into granting him immortality. "So be it," said Lord Brahma, and he returned to his restful place. After this, Mahisha attacked and conquered first the earth and then heaven. He transformed himself into a lion and became the ruler of the universe and was terrible in his fury and might. In time, the despair of the heaven and the earth were heard by Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the Trinity in the Hindu tradition. The Holy Trinity consulted with one another and their wives about what must be done to end the reign of terror unleashed by Mahisha. After much discussion, they remembered that only a woman could defeat Mahisha. But where could a powerful woman be found? A powerful enough woman be found? They knew of no such goddess or human, yet powerful enough to defeat Mahisha. Vishnu then said, "We must pray to the source for which we are all derived, Shakti, the great goddess, mother of all." And no sooner had they done so than a great radiance emitted from their bodies and united into a blazing mountain, filling the whole night with fire and sky. And a form slowly took shape and the goddess Durga was born. Her head from the energy of Shiva, her many arms from Brahma, her hair from Yama, her hips from the earth, her toes from the sun, and her ears from the roaring of the wind. Awestruck, the gods recognized that her power was that of all the gods and goddesses united in their full perfection and power. They laid themselves at her feet and asked her to restore justice to the world. She agreed and went to meet Mahisha. Upon seeing her, Mahisha trembled with fear. "Oh, beautiful one," he said, "who are you?" Durga kept silent. Mahisha continued, "Hear of my greatness. I am the great and powerful Mahisha." Durga kept silent. Once more, Mahisha cried, "Your beauty astounds me. Marry me. Together we might rule the universe." Durga felt restless at this incessant babbling and replied with a wry smile, "If you are so mighty, then show your strength to me and fight and win my hand in marriage." When the buffalo demon heard this, he bellowed, "Do you not understand who I am? I am Mahisha, Lord of the universe. You are but a mere woman. Do not provoke me." "Oh, foolish and vain Asura," replied the goddess, "I am Durga, the invincible. I am the primordial foe of evil. I am witness to all that is right and wrong. I protect the innocent and restore justice throughout the universe." A great battle then ensued. This is the part where the adults might need to hold the hand of the children next to them. A great battle ensued and raged for thousands of years. And at the final moment, Mahisha leaped into the air, but Durga was ready for him. She lassoed him around the neck and pinned him down. Mahisha attempted to abandon his buffalo body, but when he was only halfway out, Durga, with a swift and terrible stroke, beheaded him. The evil Mahisha was no more. The gods who witnessed this cataclysmic battle fell at Durga's feet and they prayed, "Oh, mighty goddess, upholder of the good and destroyer of evil, we humbly salute you. Mother of all, be our protector and our guide." And earth and heaven were peaceful once again. Goddess Durga laid down her weapons, assumed a serene form, and said, "Go forth in peace, my children. You have my blessings now and forevermore." And with this, Grandmother Lakshmi leaned back, eyed the children, and said, "So, is it all the gods together as a unity who gives Durga her power? They could not defeat the great buffalo Asura without her, but would she have been able to defeat him without them? Remember, I said you both might be right, yes?" And several heads nodded again. The goddess Durga is created by the fire of righteousness because justice and good always prevail. We too are called to fight injustice wherever we see it, yes? And more heads nodded. My children, go forth now and find the courage within to be righteous unto yourselves and the whole world. And with this, Grandmother Lakshmi leaned back in her chair, took a sip of her teas, and looked out onto the darkening landscape. And so ends our story.
What a wonderful story. Thank you, Reverend Laura. This community and our church and its many ministries are only made possible by the gifts that we all give of our time, talent, and treasure. Your gifts help ensure that we're able to live our values of love and justice in the world outside. And part of our ministry at South Valley includes sharing what we do on our Sunday worship offerings with a charitable organization that aligns with our principles and values. And so for this month, we are working with Tree Utah. And since 1988, Tree Utah has planted nearly 400,000 trees across the state, and currently is working to re-tree Salt Lake City from the hundreds of trees lost in the September 2020 windstorms. In fact, on April 11th, from 1 to 3, we're invited to come plant trees with them. Please see happenings for more information on that. So please give generously today to our offering. And let us say these words together. You'll be muted, but please say them at home. The words are in the chat box. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain ourselves within it. And we'll now hear from Tara Briggs for our offertory music.
Thank you, Tara, for the gift of your music this morning. I'm delighted by your children. They say when you hear the sound of children, it's like a prayer going directly to the sacred. So that was wonderful. Now let's take a time to share our joys and sorrows that have entered into our lives in the last week. I invite you now just to join me in a time of meditation, reflection, or prayer. Spirit of life, part of the world that connects us one to the other and across generations and across time and place and context. Hear the cry of our hearts that breaks again and again for unnecessary loss of life, that breaks again and again for the long winter of COVID. Hear our collective prayer that those who are suffering today may find rest and peace. Hear our prayer of gratitude that perhaps the COVID winter is beginning to lift. Hear our gratitude collectively crying out for those who have stayed the course this entire time, the teachers and the first responders, the restaurant workers, the nurses, the doctors, the scientists, and all of you who have been struggling where you're struggling, but faithful still to the knowing that this community matters and have sustained it through this time of separation with a commitment that should make us all proud. Spirit, we ask that you would just walk with us as we emerge from this time and tend to us. Tend to us. May the blessings of this community go deep into the roots of all of our lives. And as we begin to see the buds and the blossoms, may that remind us too, that we too have an ever growing sense of community that can expand and envelop and hold us all in a beautiful spirit of loving kindness. Let us be silent with one another for a few moments here, connecting our hearts to one another.
Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Some of you may not know me. I'm Stephen Smith. My pronouns are he and him. Most of you know Marilyn. So I grew up Catholic, and was probably Catholic into my early 20s. I met Marilyn, and she had been raised Baptist, and she had tried several other Christian churches before we met. But we were married in the Catholic Church and continued to go there for about 8 years.
Catholic wasn't working for me. Long story. We were last attending a very conservative Christian church because I had a friend there.
Yeah, and I knew she needed something else, so I agreed. And but I told her I didn't think she was gonna like. Women had zero voice there, so it wasn't gonna work.
I tried 4 different flavors of Christian across my lifetime, always thinking it's not the church, it's me. I'll find the right church eventually. One day I literally woke up one morning, realizing that it's not me, it's what they believe. Walls melted in my brain. I felt the walls melting in my brain. Logic confronted unscientific beliefs like Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel, and the creation story.
Yeah, well, I didn't really like that place anyway. They didn't allow instruments because of one verse in the Bible. So this church, a cappella singing was the only thing, which was fine. They had some really good singing, but I missed the instrumental part of it. Our kids liked it though, and but Marilyn couldn't stand it. So
Eventually.
she left, and I got to stay on with the kids. Lucky me.
After a year of searching and keeping it secret from everyone, I found South Valley. I went on a Sunday where we flipped what kids and adults do. I visited the kids' classes, sat on the floor, and John Cooper and Kathleen Luck said, "This is not normal. This is quite a not normal Sunday."
It was time for not normal, and not for me though. Yippee.
I didn't want normal anymore. I found out we were without a minister at the time. Sounds familiar, right? This happens to us from time to time, right? After a lifetime of sitting through Sunday services or sermons that made me cringe or made me stuff my feelings, I found myself sighing deep, relaxing breaths and agreeing for the first time in my life. I'm in a place that I agree with. I mean, I don't agree with everything, but searching for justice, including everyone, welcoming liberal and diverse thought makes my heart soar.
The parties aren't bad either, right? Soon our daughter Emily started attending with Marilyn though sometimes, and then even Emily bailed on Andrew and me, so I stayed with Andrew until he graduated high school.
I remember a pastor once trying to preempt the 7-year itch, saying it was immaturity that made people give up and move on or leave a church community after a given time. Our month theme is commitment, and I've thought about it a lot lately. I'm committed to the mission of this community. I've been here for 10 plus years, so I don't have a 7-year itch. My beliefs keep me and the community.
The parties aren't bad either. Music is great and varied and fun, and parties aren't bad either.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn and Stephen. And as the new minister, I look forward to those parties that you so fondly speak of when we're able to gather in person once again.
Is it right?
So when I say the word God, what do you see? What do you experience in that internal landscape? Do you experience for even a moment an old white man with a beard on a throne? But isn't that a bit odd? Isn't it a bit odd that most North Americans, whether they were raised in a faith community or not, see a flash of an old white man on a throne when I say the word God. The same is true for apples. I'll bet you just saw a red one in your mind's eye. That red apple is an embedded image, a reinforced image thousands and thousands of times from the moment we are born. And even if we never ate an apple in our whole life, we still know that apples are red. The same is often true of our embedded images of God. They are reinforced thousands of times, year after year, until they become automatic. But unlike apples, our images of God have far more consequential outcomes for our lives. Once something becomes automatic, it moves to the shadow. And from there, it often only manifests in times of stress or trauma. And even if we as adults actively walk away from these embedded images, they continue to reside in the shadow until we face them directly and integrate them with the beliefs and ideas we come to adhere to in our adult life. This process of integrating our embedded childhood beliefs with the beliefs we choose after careful consideration to adopt and espouse as adults is central to our ability to live happy, productive adult lives. And when this work is left unfinished or incomplete, we run into trouble because when we are down or depressed or anxious or just feeling lost, those embedded images can get activated and make it difficult for us to seek care from the fellow human beings around us when we need it most. For example, if our embedded image of God tells us that our suffering is not seen or does not matter, or even somehow is purposeful for our spiritual development, then a difficult time can become laced with past traumas and hurts and cause an even greater mess. Thus, we are called not just as humans, but specifically as Unitarian Universalists to do the work of spiritual integration. Without a strong and integrated theological base, our efforts to alleviate suffering in the world for ourselves, those around us, and in the wider world, which is one of the strongest aspects of our faith tradition, can end up being a bit shallow or stunted, because the well of compassion from which our efforts spring is also shallow. When we deepen our sources of compassion for self and others and the world, we build our capacity for the work of love and justice, and we strengthen the bonds of community. So what we think about God, whether we are humanist, atheist, secular, spiritual, none of the above, a recovering Catholic, a former Baptist, a theist in our hearts, what we think matters. And thinking about God is hard. It's hard work. Theologian Karen Armstrong once quipped to a student who lamented the difficulty of speaking and discerning the nature of God, especially in a culture that is so diverse. She quipped back, "Of course it's hard. It's God." So these embedded images of God matter. Whether you ever believed in this image that your mind served up for you, could you also, you sat with that image for a moment, tell me what qualities that embedded metaphor of God has for you? Is he a powerful, wise, loving, and kind father? Or is he a jealous, judgmental, angry, and wrathful deity? Is he both? Is he neither? Whatever qualities you ascribe to that embedded image, there is likely one constant within that. God is male. And that is the trouble I wish to focus on this morning. The solitary maleness of those embedded images, the maleness of God. Over the millennia, the deity has been bifurcated, split into a dualistic system whereby maleness has become synonymous with godliness. And this has resulted in a wound at the core of the feminine psyche. For if we are not part of the divine image, we are outside of it. And for men, or for those who are in male identified bodies, they are taught that any feminine qualities that they might exist diminish their divinity. And for those that don't fit into either male or female categories or identities, there's even less space. I wish to invite you to imagine God in a new way. For it is through our imaginations that we can access and shift those embedded images from life-limiting to something more life-affirming, something that opens our heart and allows it to sing. And one place to start in this process is by examining sacred texts. And that, of course, in Western culture means cracking open the Bible. Now, I know in Unitarian Universalist churches and homes, we don't have a Bible, so I don't expect you to have one nearby. But if you did, you could at least take a look at it for a second over there on the shelf. In those early texts of the Bible, sometimes called the Old Testament, but now referred more often as the Jewish Testament, we hear about the story of the ancient Israelites. And the ancient Israelites who lived in the ancient Near East and who produced those texts that would one day become the Bible were actually polytheistic for thousands of years prior to their eventual transition to monotheism. And these early texts reveal that reality of polytheism. Asherah, or God's wife, is one example. Most of the deities of the ancient Near East had wives or consorts, and El, or Elohim, as God was referred to back then, was no exception. However, over time, as El is transformed from the Canaanite high God into Yahweh, the God of Israel, his wife is edited out of the text. Because God having a wife when God is only one is a little bit inconvenient, problematic, and embarrassing for monotheism. But if you read those texts closely, her presence is there. And if we are patient, we can find references to her within and between the texts of those books. And feminist scholars have been dedicated over the last several decades to recovering these whispers by asking questions of the text, such as who is silent? Who is missing? Who was reading those texts and for what purpose? It is an effort and recovery work that involves both harnessing our intellect and our imagination in order to reanimate the lives of women in those texts. And the beauty of this work is that it requires the reader to acknowledge their own interaction and participation in the work, rather than try and hide behind Enlightenment concepts of objectivity and rationality. It is at its core an embodied approach to doing theology. Juliana Claessens, in her book Mourner, Mother, and Midwife, Reimagining God's Delivering Presence in the Old Testament, brings to the front a few overlooked feminine metaphors in those texts. And those metaphors serve to interrupt the dominant narrative of God of the Jewish Bible as violent, jealous, bent on vengeance, repulsed by human messiness, and silent in the midst of trauma. Claessens effectively reimagines God as a deliverer and offers her readers a God that is deeply concerned for human bodies and life. She reimagines through the text a God that struggles and suffers alongside of humanity. A God that sheds her fierce and harsh exterior in favor of vulnerability. In doing so, Claessens invites us to reimagine our own vulnerability as a source of strength and resilience in the face of trauma and difficulty. In the books of Isaiah and Psalms, especially Psalm 22 and 71, Ms. Claessens notices that a community facing destruction of their way of life by necessity has to self-interrupt their embedded images of God in order to move successfully through trauma. When those texts were written around 580 BCE, Jerusalem had been completely and utterly destroyed by the Assyrians, and the people had been expelled from their homeland. The book of Isaiah was written by that community in diaspora following that trauma. And within it, we find them actively reinterpreting and inserting images of the feminine. And Claessens recovered these images, and I offer them for your consideration. By interrupting that warrior liberator, that harshness that is so often present in those texts, we can find ways that communities have knit themselves together, and we can find inspiration for our own knitting, arising, coming together, and reemerging. Claessens also gives us not just God as the one who is with us, she gives us God that suffers alongside, a God that encourages us to protest the injustice of empire, a God that is not undone by chaos or evil, but confronts it directly. She finds for us a God that is sorrowfully present, and in this presence quietly mends trauma and counteracts loneliness. And Claessens also finds in those texts a recovery of God as feminine mother, as the ties that bind us together through acts of care and love that protect and nurture real bodies in real time. The feminine aspect of God as mother alongside a traditional aspect of God as father invites us to see how acts of mothering cross outside of family units and beyond gender roles to include all acts of care. This is a face of the feminine face of God that draws closer in the midst of sickness and suffering, a God that draws closer in the midst of suffering and weeps, a God that protests injustice, a God that is vulnerable. And finally, Claessens introduces in those texts an idea of God as the midwife, the one who bears witness to what is emerging in us all, and invites us to co-create and co-participate in the dance of life. And these images can, for those of us who perhaps were steeped in that tradition as children and in our adult lives, these images that are in the text can hopefully enliven and encourage us to know that it is not the end of the story, that Revelation is not sealed, that we are invited to co-create and participate in the maturing of our spiritual tradition in whatever pathway works well for us. When we unleash our creativity, that is when we begin to dance anew in community. The question is, how? How do we move from the idea of that embedded image into one that is genderless and expansive? How do we bring that work out of our heads, into our hearts, and into our community? I'm here to tell you, it doesn't require joining a Bible study, and it doesn't require even cracking open a Bible. What it does require is noticing that you are human, and that as a human, you've been gifted with a body. Everybody has a body. However it is abled, however it is shaped, everybody has a body. And all good theology starts and ends with the body. And this is a radical departure from that embedded image of God that tells us that the body is something to be ashamed of. No, feminist theology, this expansive idea of the theology of the world being in the body, is a radical resistance, an act of justice that says, no, we are good. We are born good. We are good. And there is nothing that we can do that could separate us wholly from that goodness in our lives. Bodies matter. All bodies matter. Mine, yours, gay, straight, trans, youthful or elderly, tall or short, fully abled or differently so. All bodies matter. And all bodies are holy. All bodies are sacred. That includes not just human bodies, but tree bodies and insect bodies, animal bodies, and the bodies of rocks and mountains, the wholeness of all, suchness that is. That is where we start. That is where we start, and also where we end in our theology. By looking and examining and holding up that the consequences of theology are always evident in the body. And we can trust goodness because we can trust our own bodies. Bodies matter. And it is through the body that we will imagine ourselves and our world back to wholeness. For when we begin to live and to stay in the reality that we are already whole, that is where our creativity is unleashed and our resourcefulness grows deep and our compassion expands to hold the whole of us and everybody else too. That is when we will begin to transform suffering into blessing, and blessing will abound. And there is no better work than that in this world. And there is no better time or community to do it than in this time and with this community. I invite you just to sit in your goodness for just a second, to breathe in and to feel that, and to know that we are so glad that you are here today. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Let's now go to our final and closing hymn, Blue boat home. It's the end of our pledge drive. Let's sing it together, loud and proud, and Rick will play it in the sanctuary for us.
Yes, Rick. Let us now extinguish our chalices. You're invited to unmute yourselves if you'd like and say these words together that are in the chat box. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of community, the light of truth, or the energy of action. We hold each other in our hearts until we meet again.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
As we go forth from this place, knowing that our time of worship is at its close, may our work of service truly begin. Your homework today and this week is to just be in your body. Eat something delicious, have a meaningful conversation with someone that you care about, go for a walk, or simply just breathe into this most beautiful, radiant body of yours. Feel it from the inside and take up all that space. It belongs to you. And know that that is all you need to craft your own theology of blessing in the world. Go forth now and be a blessing upon one another. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back for some social time. May you be well.